today I wanted to go ahead and do this quick video on sharing my suggestions on how you can solve answers for your matching the heading types of questions in your IELTS 3. Okay, this generally comes up to be as one of the most difficult types of questions in the reading exam, and a lot of you have asked me on what is the best way to find answers for this. This is a quick video that I'm going to share with you, and for more training, if you would like to probably discuss this in more detail, my number is there on the video. You can feel free to go ahead and contact me. Okay, so before I jump into the suggestions and how you can find answers, there's some general tips about reading that is here on the screen. I'm going to read them with you as well. The first and the most important thing of any kind of a reading test is that make sure that you understand the keywords of the question. Okay, sometimes the question may be long, but try to underline and understand what is the pertinent point of each question, which I'm obviously going to show you in some time. Okay, also it's important that you skim through the passage to find the keywords. Whatever keywords that you see in the question, try and find that in your passage, in your answer. Or you can do it the other way around. You can go ahead and look at the passage, underline the important points, and then look for that in your question. It's also one way of doing that as well. You can do it either way. For this particular question type, you're going to read the passage, then mark the appropriate option in the headings. And I'm going to tell you why in the next slide. But yes, it works both ways. You either look for keywords in the question and then come to the passage, or look for keywords in the passage and then go to the questions. Okay. Once again, the keywords may not be exactly the same. It could probably be something different in a different context, but the meaning would pretty much remain the same for you. Okay. For most cases, and this is especially for reading that is from a Cambridge book, the answers are generally in order, mostly in order. Okay, which is why I strictly tell guys that I'll tell you people that don't look for content randomly off the internet. It's not verified. It's not exactly what the exam pattern is, because the exam pattern is strictly what Cambridge follows. So try and pull up your questions or practice using Cambridge books. Okay. For matching the heading question types, especially for Cambridge books, and this is what I've seen, your answers would be in the first 3 or the last 3 sentences of that particular paragraph. And that's where you're going to find the important keywords to match with the heading, with the appropriate heading, which will be the right answer. And once again, the most important thing for reading is that you concentrate. Okay. So to give you a quick snapshot, this particular passage, this is from Cambridge 12 academic, Cambridge 12 book number 8, reading section 3. Okay, it's from the academic books. This particular passage had a total of 7 paragraphs, and it had 8 headings that you could match it with. Okay, there are different styles, different techniques for each and every kind of reading passages. In some cases where like your number of passages are a lot more, but the number of questions maybe just 2 or 3. Maybe you have to just complete that particular heading by matching with one of the headings on the question. It doesn't make sense that you read the entire passage to try and find the answer over here, because there are just 3 or 4 questions, and then there are, let's say, 7 or 8 passages. It makes sense that you look at the question, underline the keywords from there, and then look at the passage and see which words match it. In this case, because the number of I have to cover all passages and the number of headings are also almost equal, it makes sense that I go through this this way, where I read the passage and then look for appropriate options. Okay, just remember this trick, guys. Every reading would be dealt with a little differently, but the generic way of doing it is this: if you have equal number of questions, which is the same number of passages, make sure that you do it this way, where you read the passage and then look for appropriate options. Okay, so starting with the first paragraph. Okay, like I had mentioned, you would probably go ahead and see the important points in the first 3 or 4 sentences, beginning or the end of the particular paragraph. The first 3 or 4 or the last 3 or 4 sentences of that particular paragraph. Now, that does not mean that you would not go ahead and read the entire paragraph, because sometimes, in certain cases, this is generally the trend that we have observed, but sometimes it may be different. So in this case, I have already gone to the test before you guys could. So I've already found the answers, and I did see that it was mostly in the first 3 or the last 3 sentences, which is why I've dealt with it this way. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and read the first three sentences. It says, after a number of serious failures of governance, that is how they are managed at the highest level, companies in Britain as well as elsewhere should consider radical changes to their directors' roles. Okay. If I scroll down, I'll read from governments, regulators, central banks, and auditors have all been in the frame. The role of bank directors and management and their widely publicized failures have been extensively picked over and examined in reports, inquiries, and commentaries. Okay, so it says that it does talk about a few changes that are needed. It also talks about people being involved in this particular failure and how people have gone and looked at how there's been like close scrutiny done into all of the roles and the publicized failures and how inquiries and commentaries have been taken care of. If I look at the headings, I'm going to skim through this. You can obviously go through everything, but I'll tell you the two important headings that I think actually matches it. Let me do the first four with you. Okay. So disputes over financial arrangements regarding senior managers. It does not say anywhere about financial arrangements. So the first heading is omitted. Impact on companies of being subjected to close examination. Definitely. It does talk about close examination. Why? Because it says the role of banks, directors, and management and their widely publicized failures have been extensively picked over and examined. So obviously that there's a lot of close examination that's happening. The possible need for future change in every area of business does not say anything about that over here. Then many external bodies being held responsible for problems. It does talk about a couple of external bodies over here because it does talk about governments, regulators, central banks, and auditors. Okay, so that means that there is some sense in external bodies being looked at the picture. So in my suggestion, it will either be 2 or either be 4. Okay, if I read it more closely, option number 2 says the impact on companies. The focus is on impact. Nowhere out here it talks about the impact on companies. Okay, which is why the most appropriate option for this is option number 4. Why? Because it talks about governments, regulators, central banks, and auditors have all been in the frame. In the frame meaning that they are responsible for problems. They say sometimes, oh, I'm being framed for this crime. It talks about that. I'm being held responsible for this crime. That's the logic out here. Okay. So for paragraph 1, the option is number 4. Let's do paragraph B. Once again, looking at the first 3 sentences and the last 3 sentences. Okay. If I read this, that the knock-on effect of the security has been to make governance of companies in general an issue of intense public debate and has significantly increased the pressures on and the responsibilities of directors. Okay. If I read the last 4, furthermore, the amount of reading and preparation required for each meeting is increasing. Agendas can become overloaded, and this can mean the time for constructive debate must necessarily be restricted in favor of getting through the business. Okay. It does go ahead and talk about, now just one more thing I want to point out before I look at other options, because number 4 has already been used, the question does not say that one option can be repeated twice. I can take number 4 off my list. So now I have 7 options to choose from, which is why I have highlighted this here for you. Okay. So if I go to the options, if I read the first 3 and the last 3 sentences, it does talk a little bit about the pressure being increased and the responsibilities of directors. Okay. It does talk about reading and preparation required for each meeting is increasing. Agendas can become overloaded, and this can mean the time for constructive debate must necessarily be restricted in favor of getting through the business. Okay. The last part, not relevant. Why? Because this is actually in continuation of the first part. Okay. It says scrutiny. All right. Scrutiny anyways means close examination. The exact point that we were discussing in paragraph A. This is number 2 because the impact on companies being subjected to close examination. The impact being that increase the pressures on and the responsibilities of directors. That is the impact of scrutiny, which is subjected to close examination. That's your logic over here, which is why it is number 2. Moving on to paragraph C. Okay, so for this particular paragraph, it's not a very big paragraph, and if I read the first three and the last three lines, I end up covering the whole paragraph. So the logic would probably mean that it would be in the first 3 or 4 sentences. So often, board business is devolved into communities in order to cope with the workload, which may be more efficient, but can mean that the board as a whole is less involved in fully addressing some of the important issues. Okay, so according to this, I feel that the board is not addressing some of the most important issues. Now, if I look at the options over here, you tell me that now that number 2 and number 4 is taken off, if I look at 1, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, the first one says disputes over financial arrangements regarding senior managers, doesn't talk about that, omit it. The possible need for fundamental change in every area of business, doesn't really talk about change out here, so I'm omitting number 3 as well. The following number of board members with broad enough experience. It does not say anywhere about board members numbers decreasing, doesn't talk about that at all. It does say number 6, a risk that not all directors take part in solving major problems. Because it does say that it can mean that a board as a whole is less involved in fully addressing some of the most important issues. Less involved, not taking part completely, okay, in most important issues, solving major problems. That is your keyword. And that's exactly how you find it. So the answer to this is number 6. Okay, great. Then moving on to paragraph D. Now out here, once again, if I read the first 3-4 lines or the last 3-4 lines, let me read the first 3-4 lines. Now that we have 3 options already done, I think I can start speeding up the process. Let me read the first 3-4 lines and see if any of that matches the options here. If not, I can then look at the last 3-4 lines. It says a radical solution which may work for some very large companies whose businesses are extensive and complex is the professional board whose members would work up to 3 or 4 days a week, supported by their own dedicated staff and advisors. If I look at this, it does talk about a solution, sort of a solution for large companies whose businesses are extensive and complex, supported by, so some kind of a solution that's being mentioned here. Okay, so disputes over financial arrangements regarding senior managers, that's not the option. The possible need for fundamental change in every area of business doesn't talk about a solution at all. A following number of board members with broad enough experience doesn't talk about this as well. Board's not looking far enough ahead, that's not this either. A proposal to change the way the board operates. So it is a solution is also a proposal if you look at it, okay, which may work for some large companies whose businesses are extensive and complex, is that the professional board whose members would work up to 3 or 4 days a week, supported by their own dedicated staff and advisors. It is giving a proposal to change the way the board operates, which is why the answer for this would be 8, right? Because it is talking about a radical solution, right? Okay, then looking at paragraph E. All right, once again, let's do the same way. Now that I have 4 options already ticked off, I only have 4 more to choose from. Let's read the first 3 lines, see if I get the appropriate answer. If not, I can look at the last 3 lines. Okay, says one of the main criticisms of boards and their directors is that they do not focus sufficiently on long-term matters of strategy, sustainability, and governance, but instead concentrate too much on short-term financial metrics. Okay, talking about that the board is not focusing enough on matters that are important in long term. All of that, it talks about all of that. Once again, paragraph heading number 1, heading number 3 is not required. Heading number 5, following number of board members, also not appropriate for this. Board's not looking far enough ahead, because it does talk about the board do not focus sufficiently on long-term matters. Simple synonym, long-term matters, not looking far enough ahead, which is why the option for this is number 7. That's how you find this answer. Okay, so now we only have 1, 3, 5 left, and we only have 2 paragraphs. Moving on to paragraph F, same suggestions that I would follow. Let's go ahead and read the first 2 or 3 lines. Let's try to find the answer with that. If I get it, great. If not, I can look at the other 3 lines, or the last 3 lines after this. Compensation for chief executives has become a combat zone where pitched battles between investors, management, and board members are fought, often behind closed doors, but increasing frequently in the full glare of press attention. Okay. It does talk about a little bit about a battle that happens between investors, management, board members, though it happens behind closed doors, but sometimes the press is always looking at it. Okay, but I think talks a little bit more about a war zone that's happening. Combat zone is what I'm looking at. Okay, so if I read this really properly, it says disputes over financial arrangement regarding senior managers. It does talk about management, chief executives. They are all a part of senior managers, even board members. Actually, senior people only become board members, right? And it does talk about a combat zone, so disputes. I think this is what matches. Now, moving on to paragraph G, I'll follow the same suggestions. I'll look at the first 2-3 lines. It says, the financial crisis stimulated a debate about the role and purpose of the company and a heightened awareness of corporate ethics. Trust in the corporation has been eroded, and academics such as Michael Sandel, in his thoughtful and best-selling book. This, I don't think I have this anywhere, because it just says the possible need for fundamental change in every area of business, and it talks about the falling number of board members with broad enough experience. So you see, I couldn't find any of these two options in the first three sentences. Let's look at the last 3 sentences. It says, what money can't buy are questioning the morality of capitalism and the market economy. Boards of companies in all sectors will need to widen their perspective to encompass these issues, and this may involve a realignment of corporate goals. We live in challenging times. It talks about realignment of goals. Goals generally is the fundamental area of the business. That's exactly what we're looking at. Okay, they have to widen their perspective and realign their goals. That means they are going to change a few of their thought process, a few of that, which is why number 3 is the most appropriate option here for this particular answer. Okay, so that brings me to the end of this particular video. Just keep in mind, guys, that you may sometimes feel that the way I've done the answer may be slightly different in the exam that you get. Remember, every reading test is slightly different. This is for a particular reading set where you have equal number of questions and equal number of paragraphs, and you have to read everything. So I did it this way. Okay, but in certain cases there might be a certain other technique required, which I will be sharing in more videos. But for this is the best technique that I could come up with. Also, please try and use majority Cambridge books, because that has the most appropriate content, and it will be easy for you to go ahead and score marks. Okay, great. So that brings you to the end of this video. And once again, like every YouTuber, I would say, make sure you subscribe, like, and share, and click on the bell icon for more updates. Thank you so much.